Let's look at the rear mudguard or fender on the Dragstar and not the rear lights. So why the change of plan? Well, I've realised that my original plan isn't going to work now that I've come to actually try and put it into practice. I'm sure I could make it work, but that's not what I'm going to do. I thought I'd be able to use the rear lights with the existing rear fender, and I probably could, but it's not going to be as easy as I wanted it, and they're not going to end up where I wanted them because I failed to take into account the actual passenger if I was carrying one. And where I wanted to put the lights, you wouldn't be able to see them because their legs could potentially be in the way. So I don't want that issue. And so, change of direction. I'm going to change the way I'm mounting the rear lights and possibly the indicators. There's no point making them fiddly to attach and to take off again, because that's really not what I want with the build. I want this build to be simple to change. I want absolute minimum. I want to take 2 bolts out each side, so that's 4 bolts. Unplug the lights, take the old mudguard off. I want to put it back on. It's going to be a little more complicated with the to get the rear mudguard on as well, but I actually want to minimise the amount of bolting and unbolting I need to do. I want to be able to swap this out in half an hour between full mudguards, original custom look and bobber look. I want to be able to leave the seat mounted where it is, but I want that to be unitary. I want the mudguards to be unitary. I want a half an hour change, all of the look from one to the other. I've got some other things coming up for the actual bike, for some custom modifications. I know what I'm doing for the first ones. I've got a further one coming up after that, but first of all I needed to do this. So the first thing is to get the rear mudguard mocked up so that I can see where it's going, and then see how I can fabricate a mounting for it which will allow me to do that single mount, which is different to how I originally envisaged it. But again, when I originally envisaged it, I was still being guided by what I've seen on other bikes, and that's not where I'm going. So let's dig into this. Let's get this old mudguard back off, which I've just put on because it's quite wet weather at the moment and I'm still riding the bike. So let's get that off and let's get the new mudguard mocked up and cut, because at the moment it's a full length mudguard, which would be okay for a future build, and I've got something in mind for that, but that's not this build. This build, it's a shorty rear mudguard, so I need to get cutting. So let's get into it. Right, so this is what I meant by a fairly ugly rear view. Now, the mudguard will come up here, but it will leave this part open. Mudguard is going to be mounted to this, so it will remain fixed relative to the front wheel, to the rear wheel, just like the front wheel is. But what I'm thinking is that I need to cover this. I've got to allow for the mudguard moving, but there needs to be some sort of cover across here, and potentially I could use these mounts here and then mount the rear lights to whatever bracket I'm putting across here. We'll have to see how that goes, but the first thing I need to do is get the mudguard in place so I can see what space I'm working with before I start to do that, because I really don't want this on show at the moment. I've covered up the shock, generally speaking, so it's reasonably well hidden underneath these plates, but really we need this in place first. So as I say, it's a full length mudguard, and if you were going for that look, and I will be on a future build for this, then that works, but I don't want it this long. I only want it about here. One of the issues we have here is that the curve of this hits into these two bars that go across here, and that's why sometimes if you look at the mudguards that are available for these, you can see they've actually got a slice taken out, a sort of a dent, to allow you to pull this up tight to here. Now we may need to do that, but for the moment this needs to slide pretty much all the way down like that. So that is now currently resting on the ground, and we now have about that much mudguard. But I'm not going to make a final decision on it just yet, but at this point in time I can't do any more work with it because it's got that length there. So what I need to do now is to chop off at least level with this, because that would be the potential next mounting point. It's where they're normally mounted. Normally you'll see there's a mount here and a mount here that holds these in place. But given that the front mudguard is only held on by a single mount, and this actually won't be much bigger than a front mudguard, then I'm not necessarily sure I see the need for a double mount, which will mean that I can actually keep it in place. We'll have to see. It will depend how well the bracket I have in mind works. So that's work in progress. We'll see how that goes, and I need to see how I mount this. Certainly the old mudguard didn't really come down all the way to here, so there's no real reason why I need to do the same. And an option is simply to cut it off up here and go with that. So the only decision I need to make now is how much guard I have showing, and my temptation is less is more. I think I could get away with something really quite short here, and the shorter I have it, the less I need a second mount at the bottom, which will make removing this so much easier. And I don't want to use, the obvious thing would be to go for the shock mount, but the shock mount needs to be torqued, and again, if I want to do a fast change on this, I don't actually want it running off the shock mount. So I'm going to have to see what I can fabricate up to hold this in place. I know roughly what I want. Let's see how it works in practice. I want something that's reasonably symmetrical, so however much it comes down here is how much it sticks out here. So I think this will come back in a little bit more, but not very much. Maybe there, something like that, I think is going to be my sweet spot. So I'm going to sit back, have a cup of tea, and scratch my head and see what I can come up with that'll do the job in a way that I can get this mudguard on and off reasonably quickly. And that means not going for the, well, I probably will end up doing so, but my aim is not to go for the shock mount. I'm sure I will. We'll see. So I spent quite a bit of time playing around with different ideas, trying the mudguard in different positions and seeing where it would be possible to clamp it. I've decided I am going to go with the thing that is the most common, and it's the most common for a very good reason, and I'm going to clamp it to the shock mount. But what I want to do is I want to make a semi-permanent clamp bracket onto the shock mount, which will remain in place, so that I don't have to keep torquing and untorquing the shock, and that stays completely alone, because it's just unnecessary hard work to do that every time, and that really isn't the point. I do want that fast change, so I can change the bike's mode on a whim, depending on whether it's a nice day, rainy day, or whatever. So I'm going to create that clamp, and it's going to have a fixing that I'm going to be able to bolt the mudguard to, and the idea is undo 2 bolts, take the mudguard off. And what I should be able to do is leave that in place when I put the other mudguard over it. It's just going to sit inside the other mudguard. So that's the plan. Right, so although there's just a moment of time for you watching this video, quite a bit of real life time has passed since I made that first part of the video, and things have changed. As you will have got the impression during that video, I really wasn't that keen on the idea of bolting onto the shock mount. I gave into the idea because I really liked the concept of having something mounted there permanently that I could just bolt the bracket on and off. So I'm not going for a 2-part bracket that you normally see. I'm going for quite a short mudguard on the back, just like on the front, with a single part that you could clip together. But it still didn't resonate with me, and I've been distracted onto other builds on the other bikes, bits and pieces that need doing, general maintenance. So now I'm back on this build. So let me catch you up with my current thoughts on how I'm going to mount the mudguard. So this is pretty much where we are with the mudguard. I've just got this roughly jammed in place to give you some perspective of where it's going to be. Now, as I say, what I did intend to do was to put a permanent bracket on here that I could just run 2 nuts in, one here and one down there. A little bit awkward perhaps to get to, but certainly feasible. So just 2 bolts in there, unbolt them, mudguard off, mudguard on. So really easy. But it still left the issue of the rear lights and the rear indicators being up the front here, which is great until you put the other mudguards on. And for a start, the old mudguard is going to be using this. The foot peg is going to be mounted to here. So it will be a complete change. There's no way to use the rear lights I want to use and the indicators I want to use on the back with the standard stock mudguards. Still may not happen, but I'm trying to keep my options open. So, as I say, I really didn't like the idea of using this centre mount. So, after many cups of tea and quite some time sitting staring at the bike, thinking about the bike and so forth, I realised that what I needed to do is to basically replicate how the front mudguard is mounted, and that should give the bike a reasonably symmetrical view. So I've been playing around with brackets. These are not necessarily the final ones because they're not quite right, but it's a good exercise in improving my welding and such. And that's one of the big reasons for doing projects like this, is not so much to change the look of your bike, because if you're going to do that, buy a kit. If that's your entire reason for changing the bike, is to have something that's not stock, buy bits that bolt on. It's what most people do. But if you want to create something that's personal to you, that nobody else has, or you just want to modify stuff to see what happens, then this is how it works. Now, I've cut a couple of bits in tubing in half. They're actually different sizes of tubing, and welded some plates to them and practiced a bit of dressing welds and so forth. So the idea simply is that they will bolt onto there. As I say, there's a bit more adjustment needed doing to that. And then I will simply mount a tab onto the mudguard here with a hole in it, drill a hole through here, place a bar across here, and the same down here, so it actually fits. Now, because of the tyres, this is going to have to be some form of fairly curved strap or bar that comes up to here, but something I can achieve. I'm quite confident. Because of the way I've done the front mudguard, I'm not going to be able to use rod for this, which would be the far easier choice, unless I go back and redo the front mudguards, which is not outside the bounds of possibility either, to be honest. So that's where we are. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got two of these. I made one each for each side. So this is what I'm thinking at the moment. Mount about here, strap onto here. And if I did that, what you'll notice is that we're behind these mounts. Now, the only reason you might have for pulling these back down here and going across here is with the stock mudguard mounted, this might still be far enough back that if I doubled this up as indicator and light mount back here, then I can double that. I can have shock this and rear lights, but then keep the rear lights here permanently regardless of which mudguard setup I'm actually using. And that might also give me more flexibility for the number plate mount, which unfortunately when this shorty thing is almost inevitably going to be a side mount, particularly when I've got the seat in slammed configuration like this, and I still have other ideas for slamming this seat. I can think of ways of tweaking it and improving it. So yeah, so that's where I am now. So I'm going to call it a day on this one, because I think we've done a lot of talking and not much doing, and we're going to come back to this in the next video. So there we go, complete change of plan. That's the great fun of customising your bikes, and also the biggest pain in the neck in customising your bikes, but hey, that's what we do. So thanks very much for watching and taking part in this particular voyage with me on this bike, which is turning quite convoluted, and I will catch you guys again next time.